Second video about the QuikSound player. Previously, we went over the basic features of how to use channel buttons, how to mix individual channels, assign left and right ear, how to monitor meters, those types of things. A few things I did not mention is that each change that you make in the channel button area and the levels, each of those changes, the assignments, the favorites assignments, all of those, when you make those changes, they're saved into your iPhone's storage. You have local storage for your iPhone or your iPad. And when you reopen the app, you see I'm going to close the app and then reopen it just to show you that everything comes back the way it was before. Okay. So all of these settings are remembered every time you make a change. There's another another group of settings that don't work that way. And over on the far right side of the screen, we have a few things. We have, first of all, the audio output logs. This is information that really is most useful for troubleshooting purposes. So if you were trying to optimize your audio so that you have the lowest latency with the best sound quality possible, then the information provided here in the audio output logs helps to give you that diagnostic information so that you can do that. And what you would do with that information, it would help you understand, what sleep interval to set. And I'll explain a little bit more what a sleep interval is here in a minute. The startup jump rate, I'll explain that, but that's pretty much going to usually be set to the highest possible setting. So in this early version of QuikSound Player, this feature is here. It may disappear in the future because it may not even really be necessary, because I've not found very many cases where reducing this makes sense. The sleep interval, however, what it does is it determines how much time in microseconds, which a microsecond is 1/1,000,000th of a second. It determines in microseconds how long to wait between each sample of the network received to attempt to put another sample onto the audio system. So that's quite technical, and this feature is probably only here right now because in the early release version, I want to be able to have the flexibility to help people fine tune things, and eventually I want this to be fully automated. The system does have an automated system built in, which is patent pending, to try to optimize your audio quality depending on the available resources that you have on your iPad or iPhone. So let me play some audio just so we can get some numbers coming in and see some things. So right now let's see, I guess I do have some music going there, but I'm just going to play a little bit and then stop. And then you can see now we've got some audio output logs, and you may have to zoom in on your screen to see this, but the top line, it tells you how many sounds have played since the start, and how many out of the data that's received, how many seconds actually had sound in it. That can be useful. The second line says dynamic sleep interval, and right now it's saying 550. We can see down here that the sleep interval was set to 340, but the program has automatically adjusted it up to 560. And we can see currently the ratio is 0.001. Now, that ratio is calculated from the number of misses divided by the number of hits. And a miss is simply when the system tries to get audio from the buffer, from its internal buffer, and it doesn't find it there. And this is a very, very good ratio that we're seeing right now, because we've got a large number of hits and a very low number of misses. So that's very good. The number of attempts, this would be how many times did the program internally attempt to find a new buffer available to play. And you can see it's already looked 32,397 times. That's a pretty high number. And when that number gets too high, then it means the program's doing more work than you want it to do. Right now, the way you would reduce that number is you could reduce the number of micro attempts. You can see down here we've got micro attempts. When you first open the program, I believe this defaults to 20, and the log level defaults to 10. I'll explain both of those here in a little bit more detail. But this being set to 20, that's allowing a pretty large number of attempts. which is probably why we have such a large number of hits, is good compared to misses. That said, there's a balance point where if you're making too many attempts, you're using more CPU, and you can start to have side effects on your system. And so if you find that you can reduce the number of micro attempts and still have good audio quality, then that may be necessary on certain devices. If you have a fairly state-of-the-art iOS device, this may not be necessary at all. You might be able to use it just as it is. So we've gone over what the audio output logs are. Now the next area, the network ring buffer logs, this is highly technical, but it serves a purpose. I'm going to let it play a little bit more. I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit because I'm not as interested in the sound right now. But what this shows you, it shows you how much data is coming into the system and how that data is being stored in a series of ring buffers. And a ring buffer is simply a buffer that when the audio has been played back from it, the same buffer is reused. This helps save memory, helps the system run more efficiently. And this is a very technical area that you probably don't need to think about it too much, but if you see that the numbers are not changing in this area, that could be an indicator that there's a problem. Also, if you see over here on the far left side, hopefully you're seeing my mouse move, but we have sample sets. When you stop the player or pause the player, you should see the sample sets number stop. It should quit increasing at that point. And the network ring buffer logs should also essentially freeze because there are no changes happening there. And when you hit play, you'll see these numbers will start changing again, as well as the number of sample sets. If you want to see them change more frequently for some reason, at the risk of possibly affecting the sound quality, you can reduce the logging interval. So I'm going to reduce the logging interval over here to 1. And you'll start to see now we're getting updates really quickly on the sample sets. And that's just making the UI, the user interface, update more frequently, which could have a negative side effect on other performance. So I'll turn the volume up to see if we can hear some of that. And you can hear it. That is not surprising to me. So I'm going to increase the log level back up to 10. And you can see that it immediately, the audio quality got quite a bit better. So the default, when you first start using the program, the log level is set to 10. The log interval level is set to 10. And simply what that means, inside the program, there are places where it looks at that number and it waits for so many cycles before updating this information. That's simply all that's happening there. This is there for your convenience so that if you get into a troubleshooting situation or you want to, I don't know, see it move faster, you could do that. The micro attempts is an area that's a little bit experimental right now, but it is probably a pretty important one. The sleep interval is something that I think will probably keep around for a while, but you can see it's dynamically trying to calculate the best sleep interval to make the best quality sound it can. If you increase the sleep interval like dramatically, you'll hear the sound get crazy. It's not going to be good. So this kind of illustrates, you have overabundance of sleep interval, but we can see, I'm going to turn the volume down for a second here. But you can see on the dynamic sleep interval, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And the reason that's happening is because the system is ascertaining that the amount of time that it's taking for samples to play back is greater than expected because that sleep interval is too high. And so then it's going to dynamically try to find the right sleep interval. And what you can do as a user, you can set that to a reasonable level. And, somewhere like between 500 and 1,000 is a good reasonable level. And we can see now the dynamic sleep interval has dropped to 0, which is kind of interesting. So it's determined that really with the current hardware setup, it really doesn't need much of a sleep interval. There's probably a little bit of compensation happening there because I had it set so high. So if I were to stop the app, which I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to restart it, just to show you that sleep interval now is defaulted back to where it was. Everything up here is zeroed out. It's kind of starting from scratch again. We'll see some numbers pop back in there in a second. So now Initially, the dynamic sleep interval is, well, it was 476. Now it went up into the 500s range, 588. So it will try to find the best value for your system to reduce the load on your CPU and increase the quality of the audio output. And as I mentioned earlier, that this is a patent pending feature. You could, if you see that it's kind of hanging around the same level all the time, you could manually move the sleep interval close to that number and then save that setting. So now I've set it to 562. It jumped up to 616. That was probably more a side effect of me actually moving this slider, because internally it did some addition. But you can see it's settling back down close to 600, upper 500s. It's kind of hovering around there. And the quality is pretty good. Let me just kind of turn this up a little bit. Not the best, but not the worst either. You can see there's a little bit of network noise in there happening. And some of that could be that I may have a Wi-Fi router that needs to be restarted, something like that. But there are some things to experiment with here that we're smoothing out. But I've saved that sleep interval setting. I'm going to close the app again and show you that it retained that setting, because I did hit the save settings button. Well, some reason it came in at 561. That might be a slight bug there, that it's off by one number. But now when I hit play, and I'll turn the volume up a little bit, when I hit play, it's going to start off a little more clean. Like the audio is going to be closer to what you would expect and hope for from the start. And so this is something that if you start to hear more noise, like if you were tuning an AM FM radio and you heard some fuzz on a stormy night, that's the kind of thing that can happen with Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is not, there's no guaranteed arrival time, and I've reduced the delay between the amount of time from when the player receives the audio data to when it plays it back. I've reduced that to a very small amount to make this so that you can get the lowest latency possible, and pushing the envelope on getting quick sound, which is why the program is called the QuikSound player. And the idea is that it can be used for live music. The noise reduction features that we're currently working on will hopefully eliminate all of those side effects that make it sometimes feel like you're listening to an AM FM radio. But in the meantime, the internal system, that is gauging the sleep interval and allowing you to change settings, will hopefully help you achieve really high quality audio and that you can enjoy listening to without extra noise being introduced. So that covers the sleep interval, micro temps, logging interval settings, and these settings are saved when you click the save button. Otherwise, they will revert back. So like if I move this up to some crazy amount, and then I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. That didn't turn out good. Let me see what that sounds like. Oh, that sounds terrible. Don't really like that. So I don't want to save that. Maybe I can't remember what it was before. I don't really have a revert button put in place, but you can revert pretty easy. You can just close the app and then reopen it, and it will revert back to the setting that it last remembered, in this case, which was 561. And I'll show you that with, I'll set the logging interval to 8. I'll move the micro attempts to 17 and close the app and reopen it. And you can see that, in fact, those settings were retained. I think this is a pretty good stopping point for this video, and look forward to making another video with maybe some more details about things like initial setup. But hope you enjoyed this, and hope you enjoy QuikSound Player. And again, you can find more information at QuikSound.com, which is QuikSound, SOUND.com.